I found out on a Tuesday morning when the office was filled with laughter over an elegant cream-colored wedding invitation that everyone was holding. Everyone except me. My desk was empty except for a cold, half-finished cup of coffee. No ivory envelope, no gold-embossed letters, no invitation. It felt like being slapped with silence. I'd worked at this company for 7 years, nearly 6 of which had been with my current team. 15 people, each one familiar. We'd survived deadlines, shared post-work beers, and celebrated Christmas in the office with Santa hats and off-key karaoke. Yet while everyone else was joking about dress codes, wedding gifts, and hotel bookings, I sat still, pretending to be busy, avoiding eye contact with the cream cards in their hand. The groom was Jason, my 33-year-old colleague, and one of the first people I bonded with after joining this team. We'd once pulled an all-nighter fixing a broken software rollout, splitting a cold pizza at 3 a.m. Jason was the soft-spoken type, always smiling with his eyes, and somehow remembered everyone's birthdays, even when no one expected him to. I thought, of all weddings I'd ever be invited to, his would be a certainty. 3 weeks after the first invitations were handed out, when people were already booking hotels and discussing which wine to try at the Vineyard venue 2 hours outside Seattle, I finally gathered the nerve and approached Jason while he was making coffee. "Any chance my invite got lost somewhere?" I asked casually, though my stomach felt like it was burning. Jason froze. His expression shifted from relaxed to guarded in a split second. Then he looked up, voice lower, as if confessing something even he was ashamed of. "Andrew, I'm sorry. I really meant to include you, but space was tight and we had to cut down a lot. Please, don't take it the wrong way. I hope you understand." I stared into his eyes, trying to detect even a hint of sarcasm. "Nothing," he added quickly, like trying to patch a wound that had already bled too much. "We'll send over some cake and favors, I promise. Just, please don't mention this to the group. I don't want to stir anything up." I nodded, either in shock or because I had nothing else to say. When I turned away, my fists clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't care about the cake or gifts. All I wanted was an honest invitation. A small token proving I belonged to what I thought was my second family. The days after, I said nothing. I smiled at the right times, nodded during small talk about tuxedos and seating charts, pretended I wasn't bothered, but I was, deeply, quietly, in a way that couldn't be shrugged off. No one asked why I didn't talk about the wedding. Maybe they assumed I was busy. Maybe Jason had told them something. I didn't know. But every time someone brought up the wine tasting, the scenic vineyard, or Lindsay's dress, it felt like something inside me tightened and twisted. Because in those moments, I understood one thing with perfect clarity. I wasn't wanted, not forgotten, not overlooked, deliberately left out. What I didn't yet realize was that this silence would lead to something no one expected. The wedding happened on a mild Saturday afternoon in September out in Oregon. My teammates flooded social media with photos, colorful outfits, sparkling champagne flutes, skies blue as watercolor, rows of grapevines behind them. Arm in arm with Jason, they smiled into the sunset. Every single one of them, except me. I didn't linger on the pictures. Just a few swipes, and it already felt like someone had poured salt into a fresh wound. The laughter, the comments like "dream wedding" and "fairy tale" dug deeper into the space Jason carved out when he scratched my name off the guest list. By Monday, the office buzzed with energy like no one had stayed up past midnight partying. Cheryl, the loud, colorfully dressed blonde who looked like she walked out of an ADSC sitcom, glided to my desk with the force of a warm gust of wind. In her hand was a small paper bag filled with almond cookies and a thank you card bearing the couple's names. "Andrew, we waited forever for you that night. Jason said you were sick?" she asked, tilting her head, eyes wide behind her oversized glasses. I pulled my hands away from the keyboard. No more dodging. "I wasn't invited," I said slowly, enunciating every word. For a second, it was like someone had hit pause on the entire floor. Cheryl frowned. "Not invited? Are you serious?" "I'm not joking," I said. Jason told me there wasn't enough space, asked me to keep it quiet. She stood there, stunned, then stepped back slightly, as if processing a riddle with no answer. I turned back to my screen, pretending to work on a report I couldn't even remember the subject of. By late afternoon, the whispers had already reached the copy room. Ethan and Marcus approached me before 5 p.m., both shocked. They said Jason had claimed I caught a sudden fever and didn't want to bother anyone. Ethan narrowed his eyes and muttered bitterly, "Were you just the extra chair in the orchestra?" Jason knew. The next day, he approached me in the break room, coffee in hand, face tight. "You promised not to say anything, Andrew. Why did you have to blow this up?" His voice was low, like trying to suppress something heavier. "I didn't lie," I answered calmly. "I got excluded," someone asked, and I told the truth. If that made it a big deal, maybe it really was. Jason's grip on his cup tightened. He continued, as if trying to reassign me to the role of non-problematic team player. "It wasn't personal, I told you that. I feel awful, but now people are looking at me like I'm the villain." "I never told them to," I said, meeting his gaze. "They came to that conclusion on their own." He turned and walked off. That afternoon, I saw a few coworkers pull him aside in the hallway, their brows furrowed, their whispers anything but friendly. Then something unexpected happened. People in the team began to shift. Camille, the one who used to be closest to Jason's wife, texted me. "Leaving you out was messed up. I thought you were even closer to him than I was." The next day, Ethan silently handed me a hot latte at my desk. No big speech, just a quiet shrug. For the guy who got shafted. Those small gestures didn't erase the sting, but they took the edge off the bitter quiet I'd been swallowing for weeks. The strange part? Even though Jason seemed embarrassed, he never actually apologized. All he did was scold me for speaking up. That's when it started to click. This wasn't just a forgotten invitation. There was something more calculated behind it. A missing seat wasn't a good enough excuse. All 15 teammates had plus ones. And Sophie, who joined the team 6 months after me and barely knew Jason, had received an invite. This wasn't an accident. This was intentional. The question why started smoldering at the back of my mind. It was no longer about disappointment. It was the beginning of something sharper. Something that had been pushed down too long and was finally ready to rise. I just didn't realize how far it would take me. I didn't expect anything else from Jason after that awkward break room exchange. Figured he'd stay quiet, keep his distance, just like anyone who messes up, but doesn't have the guts to make it right. So when I got his text early Saturday morning, just a few lines. "Andrew, I'd like to make peace. You free tonight? Lindsay and I want to grab a drink. Nothing heavy, just clearing the air." I had to read it twice before I believed it was real. Lindsay was his newlywed wife. I had never met her, except for a quick glance at their wedding photo posted on the company bulletin board. Her expression in the picture, elegant, cold, and unreadable, made me curious about her true role in all this. We met at a small bar in the Fremont neighborhood, with red brick walls and dim yellow lighting. Jason arrived first, looking tense. As I pulled out my chair, Lindsay approached with 2 beers and set them down on the table like a peace offering. "I'm sorry for what happened," she began, as Jason sat there, visibly unsure how to start. "I know what it feels like to be excluded, and I know this hurt you." I didn't reply, just tilted my head, waiting. Something told me this wasn't the full story. "Jason lied," Lindsay continued, gently spinning her beer glass. "There was no issue with seating. The truth is, I didn't want any single men at the wedding." Jason winced, about to interrupt, but she raised her hand to stop him. "Let me finish. Andrew deserves to hear this." That sentence chilled me, not because she raised her voice, but because it came out so calmly it gave me goosebumps. 3 years ago, I was a bridesmaid at a wedding in Denver. A group of single men, friends of the groom, showed up. They started drinking too much, bothering the bridesmaids and picking fights. That night ended with women crying and police putting someone in cuffs. I wasn't going to let that happen at my wedding, so I decided only married men or close family were allowed. I straightened up. "So you're saying I was excluded just because I'm sick?" Lindsay nodded. "You never did anything wrong. Jason made that clear. But I wasn't willing to take a chance. Then why not just be honest from the start? Because it sounds ridiculous, she sighed. And Jason didn't want to hurt your feelings. I glanced over at Jason, who had remained silent the entire time. He stared into his beer, avoiding eye contact. You let her make that decision and didn't tell me? Lied to the team? Lied to me? Jason shifted uncomfortably. I thought it would blow over, that no one would care that much. You were wrong, I said, voice dry. Lindsay chimed in again, her tone softer now. I really am sorry, but if I had to do it again, I'd make the same decision. Even knowing it would offend me, I asked. Yes, she said firmly, because that was the most important day of my life. I chose peace of mind. I didn't respond. A part of me wanted to yell, to slam my glass down, to question every ignorant assumption about how dangerous a single man could be. But I didn't. I just stood up and placed cash for my drink on the table. I don't need a late invitation. I don't need a pre-scripted apology. Just do me one favor next time you want someone gone from your life. Have the courage to say it. Up. I left the bar and walked into the chilly air of late fall. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of anger, but because something inside had cracked. A quiet trust in friendship, and the hope that decency would be returned with decency. The next morning, Jason emailed me, subject a proper apology. In it, he thanked me for taking the time to talk and said that Lindsay truly felt guilty for how far things had gone. At the end of the email, Jason invited me to dinner at an upscale French restaurant downtown that Sunday night, as a way to make amends and restore mutual respect. The name Maison du Lys hit me like a splash of ice water. The restaurant wasn't unfamiliar. Several co-workers had taken partners there for big dates. It was known for its truffle tartare and wine that cost over $200 a bottle. Jason was never flashy, so this choice felt intentional, strategic. I didn't respond right away. That morning, I couldn't concentrate. The email was polite, the invitation gracious, but the core issue hadn't changed. They had looked at my name on a list and decided I was a liability, not because of something I'd done, but because I was single. When I shared the story on a Reddit forum I frequented, I expected a few neutral takes, but the replies left me stunned. They're trying to erase the damage with an expensive dinner, but nothing can undo the feeling of being seen as a threat. You shouldn't stay silent and let people assume you're dangerous. Silence becomes agreement with how they define you. Someone said bluntly, it's not your fault they were traumatized, but they made you pay the price like you were the one who hurt them. The more I read, the more I felt like I was being lured into a carefully staged reconciliation, one where the reward was steak under warm lighting in exchange for my silence. Accepting the dinner would have been the same as saying I forgave them because they fed me well. That Saturday evening, I texted Jason, I appreciate the invitation, but I won't be joining for dinner. If you and Lindsay truly want to make amends, I need a clear, public apology. Not for the food, but for the dignity. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It wasn't Jason, it was Lindsay. I hesitated but picked up. Andrew, I hope you understand the dinner wasn't meant to buy you off. Her voice was calm but tense. I genuinely want to apologize. I understand, I replied. But if that's true, why not apologize in front of others? Why a quiet dinner with just the three of us? Lindsay paused, because I don't know who in the group knows the real reason. Everyone knows I was left out, I said. The issue isn't who knows. It's that you two tried to hide it. She didn't argue, just let out a soft breath. Jason told me you're thoughtful, not the drama type. I thought you'd be more forgiving. I used to think that too, I said with a faint laugh, until I realized people can label you a threat simply for living alone. Lindsay stayed quiet for a long moment before ending the call. I didn't expect anything more from it. On Monday morning, I walked into the office like usual. Before I even sat down, Jason entered, visibly tense, holding a stack of papers. When nearly everyone was gathered, he stood up and spoke loud enough for no one to miss. There's something I need to clarify. Jason took a deep breath. At the wedding, Andrew wasn't invited, not because he did anything wrong, but due to a personal decision about the guest list. That was our mistake, and I want to apologize publicly for making him feel excluded. No excuses, no deflection, just a clean admission. I didn't say a word. But from the way my coworkers looked at me, not with curiosity, but with understanding, I knew I'd made the right choice in rejecting that polished private dinner. Dignity isn't something you trade for a restaurant receipt. It's something restored only when someone has the guts to admit they were wrong. I didn't need applause, just for the silence to stop carrying the weight of being left out. I hadn't planned to escalate this, but after that apology, I was left with a strange feeling. Not relief, but a quiet sense that this wasn't over. Tuesday lunch, I spotted Jason sitting alone at the table near the window, his head in his hands, eyes locked on a glass of water, like he was trying to make sense of gravity. A few people passed by and greeted him. He didn't look up. Something felt off. That afternoon, I booked a meeting with Amelia, our HR director. She was sharp, had handled office chaos tougher than any late-night drama series. When I entered her office, she invited me to sit with that calm but calculating look she always carried. "I just want this on record," I began. "Not a complaint, just in case it ever goes too far." Amelia tilted her head. "About being excluded from the wedding?" I nodded. It wasn't just not being invited. I was excluded because of my gender, my relationship status, and then told to stay quiet. When I spoke the truth, I got labeled a troublemaker. "I don't know how this will affect work, but I'm not going to let it slide if it turns into discrimination or bullying." Amelia typed quickly on her laptop. After a moment, she looked up. "Andrew, I won't lie. This is one of the strangest situations I've ever heard. But I understand your concern. I'm going to mark this as a sensitive report. No disclosure, no formal investigation. However, if there's any negative behavior afterward, from Jason, his wife, or anyone else, report it immediately." I left HR feeling slightly lighter, but when I returned to my desk, it wasn't the coworkers' looks or Camille's thoughtful nod that caught my attention. It was Jason's face. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 nights. The bags under his eyes were impossible to miss. I watched him sit motionless at his monitor, mouse untouched, for almost 20 minutes. Then he stepped into the hallway, leaned against the railing, and just stood there, not checking his phone, not smoking, just quiet. A while later, Ethan, Jason's desk mate, sent me a private Slack message. Jason just said he might take a few weeks off. I didn't reply right away. Conflicting feelings rose in me. Part of me wanted to say he brought this on himself, but another part wondered, was it really worth pushing someone this far? Lindsay's words still echoed in my mind. I'd still do it the same way. That kind of stubbornness that ignored consequences. Now the consequences were plain. Jason, once one of our most upbeat, easygoing coworkers, was now a shadow at his desk, barely saying 3 words the whole day. By midweek, no one pretended things were fine anymore. Our Wednesday morning team meeting felt like walking through fog. Jason didn't speak once, though he usually led the brainstorming sessions. When called on, he looked up, mumbled a short answer, and stared back at his notes. People started whispering. Camille passed me a handwritten note. "Jason looks like he might vanish into thin air." On Friday, I got to work earlier than usual. Jason was already there. He looked alert, but something felt off about how straight he sat, eyes locked on the screen, hands unmoving, like someone who'd already made a decision and was just waiting to act on it. Around noon, Jason left the office without saying a word. An hour later, I got an email from Amelia. Jason will be taking a leave of absence. Reason: psychological stress. All work communication will shift to the support team. No one said anything out loud, but when Jason's Slack turned to away, the entire team went silent for a few seconds. No sighs of relief, no sympathy either, just a noticeable chill in the air. I didn't feel satisfaction or victory, just a quiet space inside. Like after a storm leaves behind a mess, and you don't know where to start cleaning. It seemed like everything had died down, but I could sense something unresolved, because once the truth is spoken, even once, it can't be buried again. Saturday night, my phone rang close to 9 p.m. The screen lit up. Jason. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. Andrew, could you meet me at the old bar near Capitol Hill? No pressure. I just need one honest conversation. I didn't answer right away, but 20 minutes later I stepped into the dim bar, jazz music drifting in the air. Jason was already seated in the corner, face drawn, suit wrinkled like it hadn't been pressed in days. He didn't waste time. He slid a glass of scotch toward me. "Thanks for coming," Jason murmured, eyes fixed on the table. "I don't know where to start." I stayed silent. He needed to talk. I needed to listen. "When Lindsay said not to invite you, I fought it hard," Jason said softly, like he was afraid the bar noise might steal his words. "We argued for days. I told her you weren't like the guys she dealt with. You weren't a creep. You didn't cause scenes. No scandals." I lifted the scotch. Didn't drink, just rolled it in my hand. "She wouldn't budge," Jason sighed. "Said a clean record doesn't mean someone's safe." Then brought up that wedding in Portland 2 years ago, where a few drunk single guys caused trouble with the bride's family. I shook my head, still quiet. I thought I could reason with her, but no. She was so rigid. It scared me. So we made a deal. If I gave in, she'd let me choose the honeymoon spot. Sounds transactional, I know, but I just wanted peace. Jason laughed bitterly, then took a long drink. But there was no peace. A week after the wedding, Lindsay got bombarded with messages from female friends. They asked why their boyfriends or brothers weren't invited. Some accused her of reverse sexism. The more she explained, the worse it got. I frowned slightly. "As for me," Jason went on, "my old college buddies called and cursed me out." "So you're in on this control game too?" one of them yelled. 6 of them unfollowed me in 3 days. Then they pooled together $300 and donated to a women's support center, sent me the receipt with a message. "We're paying your penance for the fear you think all men bring." Jason laughed again, but it came out twisted. Worse yet, I couldn't even defend Lindsay anymore. I was mad at her, even if I didn't admit it. I started questioning not just the wedding, but the whole marriage. He paused, eyes dull in the overhead light. I don't know if I just married a wife or signed up for a deal that cost me my self-respect. I looked at him for a long moment. I didn't feel pity, but something settled in my chest, as if I were watching a different version of myself unravel in real time. "Have you told her any of this?" I asked. Jason shook his head. "She's dealing with enough. Friends gone. Female coworkers avoiding her. Her parents support her in public, but whisper behind her back that she took it too far. If I say this, she might break." "You're already breaking," I said, placing my glass down. "You're falling apart piece by piece, and don't even see it." Jason didn't reply. He just bowed his head into his hands, silent, like his whole body had run out of the strength to pretend anymore. "Andrew," he whispered, voice cracking, "I don't even know whose life I'm living. I used to think marriage meant building something, but now it feels like I'm being dismantled, one layer at a time." I had no advice. No one teaches you how to handle a marriage unraveling at the seams just weeks after the vows. I just sat there, beside someone who used to be a close friend, now hollowed out by the very choices he made. Some losses don't come from strangers. They come from the person you exchange rings with, toast beside, and promise to protect. I wasn't expecting anything from Jason after that heavy conversation at Capitol Hill, but 3 days later, right at noon, I got a surprising message from him. "Just sent you Beth's Instagram. Call it a small peace offering. She's a better match for you than anyone I've ever seen. Don't ask why Lindsay hates that so much." Below the message was a link. I hesitated before clicking. The name Beth had popped up in a few conversations. Once when Jason slipped, another time when Lindsay mentioned her with a nervous tone, as if the mere idea of us meeting would cause chaos. I clicked. Her profile was full of travel photos, books, black coffee, some striking digital portraits, and the occasional selfie with captions like, "Disorder is the highest form of unarranged creativity." Beth looked radiant, her lifestyle unlike anyone I'd met. Each photo had witty or subtly sarcastic captions, often followed by comments like, "Still living outside the rules, huh?" I planned to scroll briefly, but for some reason my hand hovered over messages. I typed simply, "Hi Beth, I'm Andrew, Jason's coworker. He said we might get along. No pressure if you don't reply, just saying hello." I put my phone down and poured some coffee. 10 minutes later it buzzed. "Oh, the guy Lindsay blacklisted for being too much her sister's type? Hi, I've been waiting 2 weeks for this message." I laughed. That night we texted for almost 3 hours. No mention of wedding drama. No one brought up the word excluded. Just indie games, a used bookstore in Ballard, and how Beth once got kicked out of a philosophy class for challenging the professor to define freedom in under 30 seconds. She was effortlessly sharp. I immediately understood why Lindsay feared us talking. 3 days later, we met at a coffee shop by Lake Union. No flowers, no tension, just two people who felt they should talk. Beth wore a white tee, jeans, and old sneakers with hand-drawn doodles. She shook my hand like an old friend, sat down, crossed her legs, and asked directly, "What would you say if I told you I don't believe in marriage but think sincerity could save the world?" I laughed. I used to believe the opposite. Lately, I'm not so sure. The conversation lasted nearly 3 hours. Beth talked about her creative design job, how she chose to live non-monogamously. Not because I'm broken, but because I refuse to be owned. And I wasn't shocked. I found it oddly fascinating. She didn't avoid talking about Lindsay. "My sister always tries to control everything. Honestly, it's because she's terrified of losing people, so instead of trusting, she eliminates." I nodded, silent for a while, then said, "I guess she just wanted to protect what she thought mattered most. A picture-perfect wedding." Beth raised an eyebrow. "You're the only one who's said that without mocking her." We parted with laughter and a promise to keep talking, but hours later I got a message from an unknown number. "Andrew, it's Lindsay. I heard you met Beth. You might not believe me, but I didn't mean harm. I just panicked. Beth is everything I can't control." I didn't reply right away. A few minutes later, another message came. "I just want to say if you hate me, I get it, but please don't turn this into revenge. I'm really trying to make things right." I stared at the screen. Not angry, not smug, just saw Lindsay, the same person who once severed every chance out of rigid prejudice, now clinging to the one connection she couldn't shield. Two people she once deemed too dangerous to be near each other. I didn't reply. Not out of spite. Sometimes silence is the only thing that forces someone to think deeply. 3 weeks after our first meeting, Beth and I had shared a series of weirdly perfect dates. From old bookstores that smelled like aged paper and coffee, to art shows she critiqued like a rebellious soul with a cause. We weren't a perfect couple by any classic definition, but every conversation clicked in an uncanny way. Friday night, sitting on the railing of her apartment balcony, Beth turned and asked, "Do you like apples?" "Depends." I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Someone once owed you a box of apple donuts, right?" She smirked. "I found the wedding venue, less than a 2-hour drive. Already called. They still make that flavor." I chuckled, surprised and amused. She remembered that tiny detail. I nodded. We hit the road the next morning. Warm indie music from the speakers mixing with the wind through the windows. Beth drove with one hand loose on the wheel and a small nod every time the vocalist changed tone. I watched the landscape pass by without thinking of the past or future. The vineyard sat nestled between rolling hills, with a wooden gate and a hand-painted sign reading Hollow Pine Estate. The air smelled of dry grass, ripe grapes, and a faint scent of baking from the kitchen behind the wine counter. We said nothing as we walked in, just headed straight to the pastry counter. The woman in the back recognized Beth's order. 2 dozen warm baked apple cinnamon donuts, fresh batch, she said, carefully wrapping them with a kind smile. I carried the box to the car, resting it on my lap. The heat seeped through the paper, reminding me of all the promises swallowed by the air that day. Beth tilted her head. "Worth it?" "Every single one is a piece of fairness that was stolen," I said, half joking. We ate donuts on a wooden bench near the vineyard. Midway through the third one, Beth leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Maybe next time, I won't have to place an order. Because then, we'll be each other's guests." I turned to meet her gaze, steady, deep, and unapologetically clear. I didn't need to ask anything more. We officially became a couple that day. No plan, no roses, no candlelit dinner, just a promised box of apple donuts, one person once excluded, and another bold enough to cross the line. But peace didn't last. 2 days later, Pam texted at 8 p.m. Saw the two of you at Hollow Pine. Beth actually picked you? I didn't respond. Beth sighed, half smiling, half weary. She's not going to let this go. But don't worry. I've got it. The next morning, another message. I don't get how Andrew dragged Beth into this mess. This shouldn't be happening. I forwarded everything to Jason, no comments. 3 minutes later, he replied, You don't need to worry. It's time someone showed her she doesn't control everything. Honestly, I support you and Beth. More than any couple I've ever seen. Soon after, Jason updated his social status with a cryptic line. Some breakups start with control and end with someone else's freedom. I figured Lindsay saw it. That afternoon, Beth invited me for a walk around Green Lake. We strolled hand in hand, sharing things we'd never said before. How she once feared commitment so much she missed out on someone who truly mattered. How I used to believe being excluded meant I lacked worth. You weren't excluded from the world, Beth said, stopping in front of me. You were pushed out of a place that didn't deserve you. We stood there as laughter echoed in the distance, leaves rustled above, and the red sunset lit up the lake. I kissed her without thinking, as if all the chaos, anger, and hurt had finally been set down. In the end, what I received wasn't just a hollow apology. It was someone who truly saw my worth. In a world that once defined me by bias, Beth recognized what was truly worth keeping. And I know there's nothing sweeter than finding someone amidst the ruins of rejection. Once excluded from a wedding just for being single, Andrew went through a quiet storm of hurt and dismissal. Yet that very exclusion opened another door. He met Beth, the sister of the woman who had turned him away, and from there discovered a relationship built on sincerity and deep understanding. Justice didn't come in the form of an apology, but in being genuinely seen. In real life, sometimes the most senseless wounds lead us straight to the most unexpected and well-earned joy. What do you think about Andrew's choices and how it all turned out? Leave your thoughts below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories and meaningful lessons about family, love, and self-worth.